What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Philly Blitz playoff preview stream wild card round. We are back. I'm Parth. I'm here with Pierre and Quell and a very special guest, Aaron Nagler, representing the enemy this week. How's everybody doing?
Someone's got to do it, Come on now. Let's do it. I'm very excited. Hey, Packers in Philly for a playoff game. I'm down with that. Let's go.
Doing good, man. Doing good, man. Playoff football is, what is it, 72 hours? I think 96 hours
Just about.
away. Doing good, man. Excited. Till you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Terrible podcasting. Well, lower dub to those who celebrate. It is I, the one and only Quell for Owens. I know Desmond Howard doesn't celebrate, so we're not talking about him. But
Packers legend, by the way. Packers legend.
Whatever.
Super Bowl MVP, baby.
Excited for this matchup, man. This is, I believe, the fourth time or the
fourth
third
time in history.
Fourth time in history these two teams meet in the playoffs. Of course, we got the infamous 4th and 26.
All right, no one needs to talk about that. We don't need to know about that. Like, that didn't happen. Come on now. But the Eagles, I will admit, the Eagles do have the advantage all time in the postseason. No question. That is true.
Certainly, man. Certainly. So, how you guys? What's the temperature check heading into the game for everybody, man? What's the level of confidence?
We'll allow the enemy to go first.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I tell you what, I've said all week, I'm not going to change it here. I like their chances if they can play a clean game. That has not been the occurrence, though, for the Packers over the course of the last month in particular, but certainly kind of all year. Like, they have killed themselves week in and week out, whether it's fumbles, whether it's pre-snap penalties, whether it's holding penalties to get them behind the sticks. As particularly on offense, they just have not been clean. So if they can suddenly clean a lot of that stuff up, I like their chances. I do think they can go toe-to-toe. We saw that down in Brazil in week 1. But, man, the idea of confidence is, okay, if we can just get through the first drive and not shoot ourselves in the foot, then I like our chances. But a lot will depend on how this plays out early in the game.
That's got to be tough for you, man, especially with Jordan Love constantly battling the two wolves within him.
Yeah, that's a very real thing, and it's funny that you put that way because it is kind of feast or famine at times with Jordan. You saw it earlier this season, all the turnovers, but you also saw a lot of big plays, a lot of pushing the ball down the field, creating big-time kind of gains. But it does seem like he's kind of reined that in now, maybe to a fault, right? Maybe to his own and the offense's detriment, as far as he doesn't seem to want to ever push it down the field now, and always trying to hit the checkdowns, which is fine. I don't really care about that. I'm fine with you being smart with the ball, but these last couple of games in particular, he's been so scattershot out of the gate. Like, there are plenty of plays that you can look at where you see him either throwing the ball at guys' feet or hitting these out routes, but they're, the receiver in question is breaking at the sticks and he's throwing it a yard or two ahead of the sticks. It's just, it hasn't been comfortable in any way, shape, or form, and it hasn't been productive. So I'm fine if he doesn't want to push it. He's trying to be smart. I'm totally down with that, but he's just got to be way better early in these games, because we've seen late in the games, he does seem to come alive, but by then they're down a couple scores. Part of that is because the offense has failed to keep up. He's got to figure out a way to get into a rhythm early in this game.
Absolutely. Yeah. All I was going to say is just, it's funny that you say those things specifically, because I swear we've had that same conversation on the pod about Jalen Hurts. And these two teams, I'm sure we'll get into in a second.
They're pretty similar, right?
Yeah.
Like, really Hurts is obviously a little bit more of a runner / kind of more physical player, I think. But I think that's apt. I think they are pretty similar, especially when it comes to the passing game, as far as if either one of them can get in a rhythm, you're in trouble as a defense.
I think it's before you go, Pierre, I think it's pretty funny that you guys mentioned that, well, how you phrased that, Aaron, with the whole he's being very gun shy with the football. over the last few weeks. Because, I mean, as I was doing my research, I see that neither quarterback, honestly, has thrown an interception through the last 6 games. And, I mean, on paper, it looks really good. But then
it's clean,
you have the conversations that we just said where it's like, but is it a detriment to your team that you're not making these throws?
Well, especially when you're used to an offense that picks up big gains in chunks, right? Like as far as you've seen Jordan, especially the end of last year, but even earlier this year, when yes, he was putting it in jeopardy at times. But at the time, I kept saying, like, I'll live with this. I'm fine with a guy who's a little bit more reckless because you've seen the amazing plays that result from a quarterback who is ready to push the envelope. I mean, you look at there's a touchdown pass he has against the Texans to Tucker Kraft, which he has no business throwing. I mean, zero business. But it is one of the most amazing touchdown passes you'll ever see. That's why I come out to the ballpark, right? Like, that's why I watch the games. Like, I want to see amazing stuff. So, yeah, is it frustrating when the interceptions happen? Absolutely. But at the same time, I'll take the big gains. There's a play against the Rams earlier this year where he chucks it into like essentially triple coverage to Jaden Reed, and Jaden Reed comes down with the ball for a 50-plus yard gain. It's like, again, that's why I come out. That's why I watch the game. I want to see amazing plays, and Jordan can produce them. But yeah, as of late, those have been few and far between, no doubt.
Yeah, so like the way we phrased it, whenever we've talked about Jordan Love on the pod, like we call him Brett Rogers.
I mean, you're not. That's not off the mark at all.
Yeah, like Parth, he talked about it. He kind of has like the two wolves in him, where it's like when he's on, but when he's off, it's tough to watch, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And so,
agreed.
But we brought up the topic of confidence level heading into the game. I know for me, like I've felt generally confident all week. And I think it's, like you talked about, Aaron, like going back to Brazil, like versus now for the Eagles, I feel like they've like established their identity. They know who they are. They know that they're a run first offense.
Right.
And I think they're going to lean on that in this game.
I think they have to, right? I mean, especially when you have a quarterback who's been, I mean, I don't even know how many games he's missed, but he hasn't played for a while, right? So of course you want to lean into the running game. I will say the thing, if you're a Packers fan, that kind of like, maybe not as a little trepidatious, but you're looking at numbers wise or just tape wise. I mean, this Philly defense has played lights out for the second half of this season, especially since the bye week, right? That's a different defense than they faced in week 1. Now, I think the Packers moved the ball fine. Like, they shot themselves in the foot a couple times in the red zone, but they could move the ball against that week 1 version of the Philly defense. This defense on Sunday, I'm fascinated to see how Matt LaFleur and company attack it, because I do think, like I said, they're playing boatloads better than they were when the Packers faced them back in week 1.
I think the big difference is, especially for the Philly people, is Avonte Maddox is no longer on the field, and we have Cooper.
I've seen that is a rallying. You guys clapping. Yeah, I get it. I feel
it was brutal, man. The amount of times
yeah.
we have seen Avonte Maddox be in the right place, outstretch his arm, and the ball go literally 2 inches over his arm. I'd be a millionaire if I had $1 for every time it happened. But
I feel that.
But
Bro,
the other
every time Avonte touched the field, something bad happened.
It was just, it got brutal at one point. But I think to your point about the first game, Aaron, is that you guys ran the ball really well.
Yes,
like it didn't seem like it was like amazing, explosive, but it was consistent, and you guys were just able to.
They ripped off a bunch of good runs early, especially with
And
what's funny is Emmanuel Wilson did a lot of that work. Yeah. I'll never forget. I was in Brazil, and I'm watching Twitter, and people are like, "We signed Josh Jacobs for all that money. Why we should have just ran Emmanuel Wilson?" It's like, all right, relax. But yeah, the run game. I do wonder about this, and I don't know. Maybe you guys have some insight here, but I do think because the Packers have been zone specific for so long under LaFleur. And then they came out in that game, and they have kind of all year been a very much more gap and or power scheme when it comes to running the football. I think that might have caught Philadelphia unaware because, and for as long as I can remember, I mean, forget LaFleur, going back to McCarthy, this has been a zone running team. And then you get to that game week 1, and it's like lots of trap, lots of power, lots of stuff that the Packers hadn't necessarily put on film. So I am fascinated to see how, Philly in general, but certainly the run defense kind of reacts to, okay, we know Josh Jacobs and company, how they want to attack this time around.
Yeah, you have. I think you're right in that. They a little bit unexpected in how they came out and ran the ball, and now you have full season's worth of film on them. You've played them once as well. I think also just a big difference for the Eagles is their tackling has just gotten so much better. During that Packers game, the amount of missed tackles was driving me nuts. There was there was one run, I think it was in the first quarter, like you talked about. It was a little bit longer, but everyone missed a tackle. I swear, everybody on the defense missed the tackle. CJ went in with the shoulder, and then you got run through.
Always throwing the chicken wing in there, right? You got to get a couple guys throwing it in there. I will say though, sometimes that's just early season football, right? Like because you're coming out of training camp where no one can tackle. You can't tackle guys to the ground, and preseason none of the starters play. So you get to early season football, especially nowadays in the NFL. I mean, the Packers were no better in that regard. Like I think they tackled okay, but that first couple of weeks is always kind of a equilibrium. Okay, that's right. This is how I get a guy to the ground kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I think we keep going back to it, but I think the addition of Cooper has been huge. He just doesn't let guys get a bunch of...
we don't need to talk about that because, look, everyone in Wisconsin, every Packers fan in the world, he was on the cover of our draft guide. Like, we were all hoping that he was going to be the pick in the first round.
It became so unrealistic at a point because every single mock draft you read from the moment draft season hit, it was seamless fit. Cooper DeJean, Green Bay Packers.
That's the problem is that that's why I understand it. Like I'm fine with Jordan Morgan. I think he's going to be a really good player, but I get the idea that we spent all these months. We had a draft party live in Green Bay. It's hilarious. You watch the video and Corey, my partner at Cheesehead TV, legit calls out the name and the whole the room. Just you could feel the oxygen just disappear because everyone was just waiting for Cooper DeJean, and then it didn't happen. And he's played really well for you guys, so that makes it exponentially worse because now you got Packers fans. Look at this guy; he's playing really well. Okay, all right, I get it. But he has played well.
So we definitely understand that. But
right.
And I think the other big difference is just and I'll let the other guys get into this a little bit as well. But it's just the emergence of Jalen Carter. I think that first week, like you said, early season, but as the season's gone on, he's just become such a dominant force in the middle. I think that's going to be something to watch in this game.
I mean, it kind of blows my mind that, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but it felt like Philly fans were kind of down on Jalen Carter early in his career. And it's man, the NFL is littered with dudes who come into the NFL, big guys, defensive linemen in particular. It just takes a bit, but I don't think the talent was ever a question. I loved that pick for Philly when it happened. And yeah, you're right. He has balled out here the second half of the season. No doubt about it.
This is Philadelphia, brother. Patience doesn't exist with draft.
That's a fair point. It's a fair point. That is a very fair point. I get it.
Certainly, man. But so, what's the injury list looking like, Pierre?
All right, so I'll start with Green Bay. Starting nose tackle T.J. Slayton. He was questionable today with an ankle. He missed practice on Wednesday. He was limited Thursday and Friday, which is today. Quay Walker, he was questionable today with an ankle. He's been limited all week. Starting safety Evan Williams. He was also questionable with the quad. He's been limited all week. And then backups Andre Dillard, old friend. How you doing, Andre? He had a concussion. And Brenton Cox, he was questionable with the foot. As we know, Christian Watson, he tore his ACL on Sunday. He's out. Safety Zane Anderson, he has a concussion. He's out also. And the Packers are also without J.R. Alexander. For the Eagles, they had a lengthy injury report to start the week. Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Nakobe Dean, Dallas Goedert, Lane Johnson, among others, all made appearances. But all the names that I mentioned are set to play on Sunday. They ruled out Trevor Keegan and Byron Young, though. But
man, what will we do without Trevor Keegan on Sunday?
Right.
I will say, well, how do you guys feel about the Devontae Smith back thing going on? Because I know he didn't practice, and all the expectation and the assumption is he'll play. That's not insignificant. A back, you never know how kind of tricky it can be. Is that something he's been dealing with for a while, or is that new, or what do you guys think about that?
This is the first that I've seen of it. But I think it also has to do with the cold weather and everything like that. I think they didn't want him to aggravate it. So
Yeah, between him and AJ Brown and the keep AJ Brown healthy plan, it sounds like they're doing.
Right.
They seem to be very precautious with their stars.
I just think,
this week.
I mean, looking at those two, obviously AJ Brown's a star and he's a problem, and you're going to have to pay him attention, which I think the Packers will, which is why I do think the Devontae Smith thing is an issue for Green Bay, because you're going to roll coverage to Brown, right? You're going to pay attention to him. I think Smith's going to have a boatload of opportunities. And you go back a couple weeks ago when the Packers were facing the Vikings, like they did a decent job against both Jefferson and Addison early in the game. Now they had a couple injuries pop up and they shuffled things, especially in the back end, and things kind of got away from them. But I do think this is a game where, yeah, obviously without Jair Alexander, you don't have someone you're just going to set to whatever side or man him up or whatever. But I think obviously he's going to get attention. So I think Devontae Smith is set for, I would suspect, maybe hopefully for my case, not a big game, but I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities in this contest, no doubt.
Certainly.
One name we haven't. One name we haven't mentioned. The Jahan Dotson breakout game is coming, man. I'm telling you, it's coming. With Jalen in the lineup, it's coming.
There we go.
7 catches, 94 yards against the Giants on Sunday. I'm telling you, man, it's coming. Just wait.
The day you die, we're going to put that on your tombstone.
He's stressing out Quell, man. He's stressing him out. Quell's like, oh my God.
Hey, man. Hey, you never know. That's the thing about the playoffs, though. Stars are born, right? Because it's the postseason. Everybody's watching. And a lot of times it's because you've got a whole year's worth of tape, right? That you know their tendencies, you know who they like to feature in certain situations. So guys can jump up. You never know.
Speaking of playoff risers, right? Packers against Eagles. James Starks all those years ago.
Come on now. See, now you're talking my language. Let's go. There we go.
Sicko stuff, man. Sicko stuff.
That was phenomenal.
Running back
that
with
was
44 was
day.
Nasty work, man. Nasty work.
Come on. What's so funny is everyone remembers, to this day, Packers fans still talk about like the James Starks run as far as like, oh, he really came to prominence in the playoffs and he helped fuel them to the Super Bowl. But it's like the Philly game was his one big game. Like he didn't go off against Atlanta or Chicago. I mean, he played well in those games, but it was the Philly game where he really kind of just blew up. And I'm here for it. I'm all about that life.
Absolutely. That's how it goes, man. Playoff risers and then regular season fallers. You never know. You never know.
A lot of that.
Here, this is a good question. We can get to this real quick before we get into it. Kind of talked about it a little bit, but how much does Jalen Hurts not practicing for 3 weeks, not playing either, obviously, worry you coming in hot to a playoff game? We can start with you, Pierre, and then go to Quell.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective to look at, because it's like on one hand, it's a concussion, so it shouldn't necessarily have impact as far as like on the field play, but at the same time, the guys missed essentially 3 weeks of football, right? The last time he played a full 4 quarters was before Christmas. It'll be close to a month that he's taken like a snap in a live game. Like that has to count for something. And then it's like you add on to that, we've watched, the offense all year. Like we know the passing game, I guess for lack of a better term, has pretty much been really inconsistent. And they really had just clicked in the Pittsburgh game, which was the last time he was 100% healthy, right? And so, like, I'm not naive to sit here and say, like, oh, Jalen is Tanner McKee or some, like, first-time starter or something like that. Like, he's played hundreds or thousands of snaps with this personnel. But, like, I still do think it's something to monitor. It's something to pay attention to.
Definitely, man. I agree with you 100%. I think it's worth noting. It's honestly, I was thinking about this. That's I believe a week or two ago where I was like, this is how I knew last year was just going to be a waste. I should have seen everything coming because we didn't deal with our annual Jalen Hurts injury that we deal with at this point in time of the season. Every time at the same point in time of the season, right before the playoffs start, Jalen Hurts goes out, misses a couple games. We have a backup quarterback play. The city goes crazy. 1 week they play well. We're much better without him.
True. That's
the next
so
week
true.
They play bad.
Most popular guy in the country or in the city always is the backup QB. So good.
So just, I like you said, Pierre, I'm not naive enough to just expect Jalen to come out here and pick back up where he left off at. Kind of goes into the conversation we had earlier where Saquon Barkley and the rest that he's been able to get over these last few weeks will play a pivotal role in this football game.
What's interesting to me is you mentioned that Pittsburgh game, man. He looked like they were smoking as far as like just being able to be in rhythm and completely understanding the kind of what the defense was presenting, right? Because I know you guys know, like the drumbeat up until that game was about how disjointed the passing game was, the whole drama between Brown and Hurts, whatever that was about. But it's like they come out there and man, there was nothing the Steelers had for them that they didn't have an answer for. And then to just have it gone, right? To have this guy on the shelf, like you said, for a month, that's where my hope as a Packers fan, obviously, is that, not just that like there's rust, but that Halfley and the Packers defense come out there against profile, right? Against type, against like stuff they've put on tape all season long. All right, like throw a bunch of curveballs at him early. I'm not saying that has to be the game plan for the whole game, but like make sure that he's right because, I think the Packers sent pressure after him a handful of times in that game in Brazil. And to Hurts' eternal credit, he did a phenomenal job of checking at the line, getting into the right protection, knowing where his hot was. Phenomenal. But that was very minimal. Like Halfley on the year is 29th in blitz rate, right? So you got to think if you're the Eagles, okay, we're going to come out there, we're going to A, run the ball, obviously, but B, when we drop back, we know there's a certain kind of, we're going to get zone, we're going to get a lot of cover 2, cover 3, etc. Well, if I'm Halfley and this guy hasn't played for a month, send the dogs, man. Get after him and make him prove that he's on point with his teammates in the scheme and everything after a month off. Like that's where, as a fan, that's where I'm hoping this leads.
Absolutely. And
it's hilarious that you mentioned that Jeff Halfley blitzes the 29th in the league. Because Vic Fangio blitzes at 31st.
I know, right? I was looking at that this week and I'm like, this is hilarious. Like, but this is the other thing. It's like the talk in Green Bay with the fans this week has been about, the Packers have struggled against man coverage. The wide receivers have struggled against man coverage. Well, it's not like Fangio is a huge man merchant, but there's a chance, right, that he turns to that a bit in this game because the Packers have really struggled against it, especially now that Christian Watson's out of there and you don't have to worry about him blowing the top off. So that, to me, again, both of these defensive coordinators do not like to send pressure, but I suspect we'll see pressure and man a little bit more than either of these defenses normally put on tape.
Absolutely.
I don't know. At least maybe on Philadelphia's part, how I see it. But we'll touch on the Eagles' defense against the Packers' offense in a few. In terms of
let me get my thoughts on Jalen before we move on real quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is, I think it's pretty similar to what everyone has said. Like you said, Aaron, that first week against the blitz, especially because you guys blitz us a little bit, and obviously you don't blitz that much, but we saw some pressure, especially after last year and how last year went. To see him addressing the blitz as well as he did, that was a huge sign of growth, and everyone was super happy about the Kellen Moore experience at that point in time. And it's been a roller coaster since then, to say the least. Right. So I think we hope that Jalen comes in and is still kind of operating in that same place. And, to be fair, before then, he didn't play in any preseason games, right? So he was practicing, but it's not like they had, live snaps that he was playing as well. So, you have that as well. But at the same time, I'm not going to be naive and act like, all right, he hasn't played since week 15 and he's going to come in and completely dominate right away, because that's not the way it goes.
I'll tell you what, though, against the Green Bay Packers and their defense, usually that is the way it goes. I'm just telling you, history is your guide. It wouldn't surprise me.
You sound about as broken as the rest of us. So,
I'm just saying, man. I've been hurt.
Not just in Philly.
I've got scars. All right. That's all I'm saying.
It never leaves, man. It never leaves you. But
correct.
But like we talked about a little bit, I think this is really going to be a Saquon Barkley game. I think they're going to lean on the run game pretty heavily. I think, on your D-line, I think the D-line had a lot of high expectations at the beginning of the year, similar to our defensive line. And I don't think it's, turned out to be as good as we had expected. And I think we keep talking about the similarities. I think you guys are kind of similar, where you guys were stronger on the back end of your defense versus, the defensive line. So I think Eagles are going to try to take advantage of that, try to run the ball. And so I think they'll try to take the game out of Jalen Hurts' hands as much as possible, just because, you know, it's tough to come in and play right away, even though we're playing the Packers, so you never know. But yeah, I think it's just going to have to be a game where Jalen doesn't play too much outside of himself. And I know that's kind of weird coming from us three, especially, who've been talking about, hey, Jalen, start taking some more chances, start, you know, throwing those balls to AJ. But at the same time, you don't want to be super aggressive because this defense has just been very opportunistic. And on the other hand, when they don't get turnovers, it's not as, you know, fearsome of a defense. So you just kind of have to hold on to the ball and win the turnover battle.
Yeah, the Commanders game was eye-opening to me. Like, that's a game where they played well at first, and then they the way Washington just kept coming after them, and I think surprised them a bit. And now, obviously, look, Jaden Daniels is amazing, and like what a rookie campaign, etc. But there's some stuff there that you can look at as a offensive game planner and go, okay, wait, they're not invincible, right? There's certainly areas in personnel that you can take advantage of. But man, like you were saying, they've been opportunistic as hell, and they've got talent all three levels. So nothing's easy. Nothing's easy against them. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So Quell, what were you getting into, bro?
I was gonna say, so in terms of Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense against the Packers defense and Jeff Hafley, we had a lengthy conversation in week 1 about Jeff Hafley and what his specific approach was coming into the league. A lot of people referred back to his time at Boston College. Me being an Ohio State fan, I mean, that was the first thing I turned back to, what he was able to do with that Buckeye defense. But
he was good. He did well when he was in Ohio State, no doubt.
He brought us a national championship.
Yeah, but absolutely.
I mean, for me, it was the premise to stop the run, most notably the quarterback run. And I mean, on the season, I believe the Packers allowed, just like the Eagles, 4.1 yards per carry to running backs. But to quarterbacks, that number drops to 3.5 yards per carry, which is among the tops in the league. So they've done a really good job containing quarterbacks, not allowing them to basically wreak havoc, which kind of like the first game. I think Jalen Hurts had 11 carries, 35 yards or something of that nature. Wasn't nothing too dominant. And me and Pierre discussed last week about how the Eagles have been ramping up, utilizing him in the rushing game, and how playing against this Hafley defense would impact that. But for me, the passing game is really where things start to click, because like you said, the Packers didn't really rush Jalen Hurts a lot the first game. They played a lot of coverage. They dropped back. And at that time, it was a lot of single high like he liked to do, at least, like he spoke about when he was first hired. Now, over the course of time, the Packers have done a great job of evolving, showing a lot of basically disguise on the back end. And I believe they ranked 3rd in the league in terms of the amount of cover 2 they run.
That's right. And I just talked about this on my chat earlier today. That's right.
So with that situation, it kind of reminds me of kind of like, I believe it was the Jacksonville game early in the season where we had a conversation where it was like, well, Jacksonville, they're big on just please not letting things get behind me. They're
behind you, right?
Like cover 2, cover 4. They
keep it all in front of you.
Keep everything like that.
That's a lot of that.
And Jalen seemed to struggle against that. So it specifically him against zone coverage on the year, I believe he has an EPA of 0.02 per drop back. Packers run zone on 78% of their snaps this year. Now, how does Jalen Hurts able to basically, with him coming back, like we mentioned, from that first month of not playing football and the Packers basically making him read coverages, does that concern you guys?
I think it's as simple as like Parth put it, right? Like for me, Jalen just has to not try and play outside of himself, right? Like if you're gonna play cover 2, you're gonna leave 2 safeties over the top of the defense. We're gonna run the ball at you, right? Like we're gonna give the ball to Saquon Barkley, and we're gonna let him.
That is it. It sounds simple, right? But like, what's funny, you mentioned the cover 2 usage. They are 3rd in the league for the season. Guess what game they ran the least amount of cover 2 in? That would be week 1. Because you need that extra body down in the box because you got Saquon Barkley coming at you. So, yes, if they do come out in a bunch of cover 2, you can expect the Saquon Barkley show, definitely.
So, for the Eagles defense, how do the Eagles attack this Packers offense? I mean, defense is interesting. You guys mentioned, specifically you, Aaron, this could possibly be a big Devonta Smith game. Now, of course, with no Jair Alexander, how exactly do you think the Packers coverage, with the Packers and Jeff Hafley were attacked coverage wise, this Philadelphia offense? More so not wanting to leave these corners on islands like he may like to do, but also giving the extra body to take care of Saquon.
Yeah, there's no way they man up here, right? There's no world they're living in where they go, okay, we're sending bodies pass rush wise, and we're leaving our guys on islands and man coverage. So that is not happening. They're going to run a kind of a dial of coverage, right? As far as, and I say this quite a bit on my chats, and I finally had someone say, "What do you mean by that?" And it's just something I heard Rex Ryan say back in the day, where it's like he literally, like, you know, there was that stretch there, a 2 or 3 game stretch where the Jets actually did a pretty damn decent job against Brady and the Patriots, and it's what you have to do against quarterbacks who know what the hell they're looking at, which Hurts definitely does. You just got to keep them guessing. And you're never taking anybody away. You're not going to stop AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, whoever. Like, you're not going to stop them, but you got to keep them guessing. You can't have them get up to the line of scrimmage and know exactly what's going to happen after the snap of the football. You saw that a bit in Brazil too, because they did play some, you know, I think 17% of cover 2, but they rarely presented cover 2 prior to the snap, right? And that's kind of been their MO all year, where they'll show a guy down in the box and then they'll bail out at the last second, or they'll show 2 high safeties and they'll have a guy drop down last second. Like, that has been kind of their regular way of working. And I do think you're going to see a bunch of that on Sunday just because they can't man up. There's no way. You're asking for death if you do that with Green Bay. They've got corners. Keyshawn Nixon has played better. Carrington Valentine has certainly come on over the last month, but man, there's no world you want to live in as Jeff Hafley and say, yeah, we're just going to cover 0 and we're going to let these guys play man. Like, that's not happening. So, yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of mixing and matching of coverages. You'll see a lot of games up front from the defensive line because, let's face it, again, you're talking about there's no world we're living in where that front 4 for the Packers can just win up front, right? They're not getting home against this Eagles offensive line unless, of course, Lane Johnson misses the snap of the ball again, like he did in Week 1 where Sean Gary got his sack. Like, they're going to have to play games. They're going to have to try and maybe simulated pressure stuff, maybe some delayed blitzes from the secondary, etc. But they're going to absolutely throw the kitchen sink at Hurts in the passing game coverage-wise just because that's their only hope. They cannot man up. There's no way you sit there and give them the same thing down because they'll just pick you apart once they get a beat on it. So, yeah, they'll mix it up as much as possible, would be my guess.
And it's interesting because Jalen and Jordan, we talked about their similarities, but they're also so opposite. It's so funny. I mean, we like with Jalen, his superpower is his legs, and with Jordan, his superpower is his cannon of an arm that he just can just try to get the ball into any window. Jalen struggles against zone coverage pretty heavily, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league against man. Meanwhile, Jordan struggles against man, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league against zone. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how these defensive coordinators try to balance that because you also can't, like you said, just give them the same thing over again because they're going to get a beat on it. And especially these guys who you let them get into a rhythm. Both of these guys are like,
over.
It's over.
Both these guys are such rhythm passers. Agreed. Very much so.
Yeah. So it'll just be interesting.
To that point about Jordan Love, right? We touched on Jalen's injury. I know the Jordan Love injury storyline has been talked about ad nauseum this week, just like Jalen's injury. So, a question I have for you: do you think like the injury to Jordan Love, you think it's more kind of like fluff, or is it like something legit for Packers fans to be concerned about?
I'm glad you asked that because I do think it's legit, and I do think it's something where we'll know early on how much it's bothering him, right? Because I mean, you saw how he reacted. I don't know, maybe you didn't, because God bless you if you didn't watch that Packers-Bears game, because that means you're on with your life, which you should be. But yeah, you saw like he hits the ground and he loses feeling and he really immediately knew. And then he's on the sideline. He's trying to throw the ball a little bit, blah, 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 but he never comes back in. And then that practice on Wednesday, they wouldn't let the media like even watch the normal kind of pre-practice routine where they're doing individual drills and he's throwing whatever. Now we saw that on Thursday and Friday, but that tells you there's something lingering there, or at least there was, right? And he talked about it in the locker room about how, you know, it hurts in his elbow when he's throwing still. So I don't think everything's magically better. I think this is definitely something that's lingering a little bit. Now, again, how much is affecting him, I think we'll know early in the game. But the other issue is, like, you're talking about that. Okay, fine. But now he wasn't throwing the ball well when he was fine. Like, you talk about these last 2 games against Minneapolis and Chicago, he was really off early in these contests right out of the gate while fully healthy. Now you go into a playoff game where you're dealing with this injury and this nerve issue, and you already weren't very accurate. So that, to me, yes. You want to ask is it a real concern? Hell yes, it's a very real concern.
Yeah, I mean, sitting on the outside, I was sitting here thinking it was a lot of fluff because the way they were talking about it is he's like, oh, like, I'll be fine, I'll play. So I was like,
funny bone.
Right. I was like, are they trying to, but that makes sense. And especially if you're just feeling unsteady about him previous to the injury, a little bit of the opposite of Jalen, where we were feeling good previous to the injury. Coming back, you never know. And you said it earlier in the pod where the Packers kind of want to have a good chance in this. They need to start off kind of fast. You know, it can't just be
that's been their MO all year. If they can start on the front foot, they usually have a good chance of taking control of the game early on, and that has usually led to a victory, right?
Mm-hmm.
But man, more often than not, especially against the better teams, it has been a disaster early in these games. That's why I keep saying, like, if we get to the end of the first quarter and it's not 14-0 Eagles, I feel pretty good. I'm fine. But that has been the issue for most of these contests against the better teams in the NFC.
Sounds a lot like the Eagles.
But
right. We keep talking about the similarities and, you know, how similar they've been this year. In the playoffs last year, it couldn't have been more different of a story for these two teams. You know, Packers walked into Dallas and put B to A, you know, just put them on blast.
You guys were loving that, though. I know you were.
Oh,
come on now.
Anytime I get to watch the Cowboys lose, and especially to the Packers, who they just feel so broken against, oh, man, you can inject it into my veins any day.
It's amazing. It's amazing when they lose and it's like on national TV.
Oh man,
like everybody's watching.
And when they're talking,
and the hate watch of the Cowboys, there's no greater thing. Like, there's nothing more perfect and poetic to bring this country together than everybody rooting on the Cowboys' downfall.
When he threw that pick six, and you can hear a pin dropping.
So good.
It was like, oh no,
love it. Absolutely love it.
They are America's team. America loves to watch them lose. So
exactly.
We got that
perfectly stated.
But yeah, so you guys went in there. You put, you know, the Cowboys on notice. You put the league on notice. Jordan Love had like a great game, and looking at, you know, what Jordan Love can do in these playoffs. Meanwhile, the Eagles, missing A.J. Brown, go into Tampa and stumble, to say the least. And it just looked like everything that had gone wrong in the season went wrong in that one playoff game, and it was just so disappointing. So now that we are here, you know, 1 year later, and now they're playing each other, how are you guys feeling looking back at last year, looking at this year, and now looking at this matchup?
You go first, Aaron.
Oh, yeah, sure. Have me do it so you guys can double down on how you're going to kick our ass. I get it. No, I get it. I will say, man, I'm always an optimist. I'm always a fan. I'm always rooting for my guys. I think, like I said earlier, I think they have a really good shot if they can play a clean game, especially early. I'm not under any illusions. I had somebody in my chat today like, the Eagles aren't that good. I'm like, all right, relax, like, dial it back. The Eagles are fucking good. All right, I am under no illusions. But the Cowboys were good last year. Like, it's like, I know the Packers went in there and destroyed them, but it's not like it was, I don't know, smoke and mirrors. You know, the Cowboys were a really good team, especially at home. So that just speaks to the nature of any given Sunday. I do think we've talked a lot about the similarities with these teams, and I do think it, especially offensively, they're somewhat mirror images as far as like the Packers and the Eagles both want to run the ball, right?
Yeah.
They both have dynamic backs, and I think the team that is able to kind of force the other to live in 2nd and 12 or 3rd and 7. That's where victory is, right?
Yeah.
And, I don't doubt for a moment that the Eagles have the advantage here playing at home. I do think they have better personnel up front, which is where the game is won and lost, right? On both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. So it's going to take Matt LaFleur getting into his bag. But I've seen Matt LaFleur get into his bag, and I like their chances in that regard. But, yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. I don't think the Packers are getting blown out, I do see that a little too much for my liking as far as both nationally and some of your fellow Eagles fans pumping their chests. But I do think this is going to be a great game, and I do not doubt it's going to be a bit more defensive driven than I think most people are expecting.
Definitely.
Yeah, man. I think for me, like as kind of cliche or corny as it might sound, I think the biggest difference this year for the Eagles, it's like legit the vibes, right? Like there's been a ton of talk about like culture and joy and the enjoyment that comes with playing football and celebrations and everything like that. If you look at last year, the vibes were legit in the mud. Like they made the playoffs, but you could tell like even in the locker room, the belief like wasn't there. And like this year, again, like you see the joy, like you see all the celebrating. You hear Nick Sirianni, him talking about not being a prisoner to your expectations. You hear him talking about how the team has 2022 vibes, and you see it on the field, right? You see the way after the 2-2 start when they lost that game against Atlanta, how that was a little bit of adversity that they faced, even with AJ and Jalen, more adversity. They kind of fought back, and they, it's like whenever any sense of like turmoil has come up, they've responded and they've battled and fought back through it. And I think that's like the biggest difference this year and last year for the Eagles. I think like they aren't like pressing to get anything corrected. Like I think that like I talked about at the top of the pod, they know their identity on both sides of the ball, and like you can actually like feel like when you watch this team, you can feel the culture, like you can feel the enjoyment that they play the game of football with, right? Like even that video that we tweeted earlier from the TPB account, like and it was Nick, he was like legit going player through player and just detailing their role. Like you can feel the togetherness that they're playing with, right? And I think like to me at least that like has to count for something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, man. I can understand that. At least for me, the biggest difference from this year to last year, and I mean, I guess you can make the argument that, at least for me, it extends beyond last year, is coaching. I've harped on this all season long. I've been the biggest Vic Fangio supporter from the beginning of the situation, from when the hire was made. There were a lot of people who basically were sick of this defense and wanted to get it out of town. And I mean, as Pierre loves to say, it's a difference between the bastardized version and the real thing. But I mean, just in general with coaching in this Philadelphia team, like I said a second ago, for me, it's gone back not just last year, but years beyond this. You could talk about the similarities between this Eagles and Packers team, this Packers team being the youngest team in football, this Eagles defense and how young that they are specifically. And it brings me back to when the Eagles played in that 2022 Super Bowl. And I mean, you can make the argument that the Eagles probably had the more talented roster of those two teams playing in that Super Bowl. But what the game ultimately came down to was coaching. And what I found myself saying at the point in time was the big difference to me in those two teams was veteranship. The Eagles, how I continue to put it, and I definitely put it the same way last year, the Eagles had a bunch of bright ideas, but no adults in the room. And you look at a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who, while their defense was really young in itself, you had a veteran like Steve Spagnuolo calling the plays, and how by the season's end, that defense came together very well. And then you see how great it was last season, but ultimately just led that team to a Super Bowl. And I see a lot of similarities in this Philadelphia Eagles team where defense just young as it can be. And then you have a guy, Vic Fangio, the veteran play caller, who can help put these guys in the right position to succeed.
The angry old man who only cares about ball, man. You need one of them. You need one.
That's a really good observation, dude. Like as far as Fangio, like coming in there with Like with
He's watching the Ohio State game. I knew looking at his reactions.
With the talent they've like accumulated, right? And to have him come in there and just sort it out, like, yo, I know Miami like was a stop along the way,
I
but
just don't get it.
No
man.
idea what the hell happened there, man.
I just don't get it.
But
some guys are built for it and some aren't.
Some guys aren't, and I don't think they were. And like
how is the whole team so soft? I don't get it. They had
entire team.
Everybody.
You talk about culture.
Teams typically take on the look or feel of their coach. I'm just saying, Mike McDaniel is a hell of an offensive play designer. But
cold Mike McDaniel, always cold on the sidelines. What was it?
I mean, y'all know how I feel about
by the heater.
Man.
He was hanging by the. They called him soft.
Who was that? Somebody for a while had that old cold coach meter. Who was it? Somebody online. I can't remember who it was, but like, yeah, if you saw it when the game started, whoever had like the bigger Michelin style coat and the big hat, like that was the coach that was going to lose because like you can't be cold. You can't be looking cold on the sideline.
You know, it's fun. It's funny you say that because Jalen's first practice, it's been cold here. Now it's not right. Green Bay cold, but it's been Northeast cold.
Oh, I'm in New York, so I get it.
Oh, all right.
I feel it. I felt it.
So you know what it's been like. Jalen came out with the sleeveless, came out no sleeves, came out in the cold. Tough guy, football guy,
or farming.
Who was it? I think TJ Lang, former Packer in Detroit, Lions guard. He pointed out some team was playing the other night, and they all came out in the cold, and they're all sleeveless or even shirtless.
Tennessee.
And they went, I think yes, and then they went out and lost. And he's like, "Yep, morons coming out before the game without shirts on in the cold, undefeated." On losing.
I hate it when they do that.
Hilarious.
I hate when the O-linemen
funny.
They come out without shoes, and I'm like, dude, like I know your toes are freezing, bro. Like, come on, let's stop the macho act.
Hey man, whatever puts you in the headspace, I guess.
Right. I guess you got to be insane, but
right.
Just kind of echoing what honestly all of you guys said is just that I think it's a different year. The vibes are right, the aura is right, Pierre. And I think, like you said, Quell, the defense, you have an adult in the room. I was wrong about Vic. Beginning of the season, I'm still okay with me questioning it because it looked horrible. But my God, the way they turned it around, I will do anything for Vic Fangio at this point. He needs a kidney, he's got mine. He needs a heart, he needs a spleen, whatever it is, he's got it. As long as he keeps coaching. But I think, the vibes, fine. The defense, yeah. But I also think we got freaking Saquon Barkley, man. Like we have.
It helps, right?
It helps a little bit.
It's so easy. It's so amazing being able to press that button.
It doesn't suck, right? It's weird though because like Josh Jacobs has done the same thing for Green Bay. Like I get he's definitely on a different level. I'm not saying he's Saquon, but he's completely changed the entire identity of the Packers offense. Like he has completely changed it the same way Saquon has.
With the Ravens, they have a running back they trust.
With Henry, yes.
You get like this offseason has just changed how running backs are approached. And now that also means some team is going to make a stupid deciin and pay a running back when they're not ready.
I just hope they're in the NFC North. That's
exactly. Already happened. And you're right. It was in the NFC North.
There you go. Ooh.
Who signed the running back?
If you know, you know. Just know that he got signed pretty early.
You talking about Aaron Jones?
No. He's been very serviceable for them.
Is there someone on the Lions?
DeAndre Swift
for the Bears.
Former Eagle. No Philly guy slander, man. No Philly guy slander on the podcast, bro. He deserved that bag. My man deserved that bag. All right, let's go. Sancho's prep, baby.
He's also a really good talented back. He's just misused. Like I think if he's a complimentary piece, he's fine. But like, yeah, you don't want him as your lead guy in any way.
Especially if you don't have an O-line.
What player in Chicago did get used properly this year?
Nobody on offense. I'll tell you that.
that exhale told you all you needed to hear. That was a brutal year for them, man. But yeah,
they just beat us, so I can't like talk junk. It's not like I can sit here and say, "Oh yeah, they." Although, I mean, it only took them 12 tries.
That's what I'm saying. You got to let
at some point they're going to win. Okay.
My Chicago friends were elated, man. They were like, "We finally got
their Super Bowl, 100%." I get it.
For years, man. Especially when it went from Aaron to Jordan, and you guys were still beating them. Man, I felt bad.
I still own you.
Still own it. We just passed ownership down. It happens. So what are you gonna do? It's all good.
But I think it's hilarious how we just mentioned Saquon Barkley and how around here, at least on the pod, we utilize the term the easy button when it relates to Saquon Barkley. Now, I was doing some research this week into the Packers, and the Packers have a bit of a quote unquote easy button on themselves. And I mean, it kind of relates to something that you mentioned earlier, Aaron, where, like you said, the Eagles and the Packers, I believe, are the two most rushing teams in football this year. But the Packers, what their easy button comes into is Josh Jacobs being able to set them up in these third and manageables, second and manageables, and allowing Matt LaFleur to get in this bag that you talk about, allowing him to call these RPOs, the play action, the screens, basically to go get some yards for me right quick, and you don't have to do much for your quarterback. They've done a spectacular. I believe I seen a chart this week where, in terms of play callers, the Packers call the easy button basically plays at the 6th highest rate. So it just kind of shows how Matt LaFleur does a really good job of setting this team up for success. Now, last time you and I talked, we talked about the transition from basically Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love and how it gives Matt LaFleur the opportunity to call basically his offense.
Right.
You talk about this Packers team. It aren't many teams that motion more than this Packers team.
No, yeah, they've been one or two pretty much all year. It's kind of gone back and forth between them and Miami.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's interesting though, because there's certainly a lot going on there as far as the passing game goes, and their use of condensed formations and motion, something they didn't do a whole lot of with Rodgers in town. But it is interesting to see how Jacobs has kind of somewhat messed with that, as far as, I mean, they are far and away the team that utilizes the run game on first down more than any other team. Like even the Eagles, like they run on first down. That is their whole MO. And to your point, a big part of that is Jacobs being able to, because we've seen it, man. Like teams know they're going to run on first, and so they send numbers. We'll see blitzes from linebackers, even safeties, into these gaps, and Jacobs just does a phenomenal job of creating something where there's nothing, whether it's spin moves or just powering through what should be like, I don't know, like 1 yard gains or even no yard gains. He's making into 3 or 4 yard gains, and that keeps them ahead of the sticks. It keeps them in an area where, yeah, Matt has the whole playbook open to him. Now, they haven't been nearly as effective on third down this year as they were last season, and that has been an ongoing issue. Some of that is the play of the quarterback, some of that is the wide receivers, but there's no doubt there's plenty of opportunity there. They just haven't been as efficient as they had been last year when it came to those opportunities.
So, in terms of, you mentioned how this Eagles defense could approach, or Vic Fangio could approach, I related to it as a chess match. Now, there's always been, there's this thing we talked about all season long about the success that he's had against these Shanahan architect type offenses, things of that nature. I think personally, we will probably see a plethora, like pick game by game of some of the blueprint. As I was going through how this team could basically stop the Packers offense, like I mentioned, how often they motion, it reminded me of the Saints game where early, through weeks 1 and 2, the Saints offense was on top of the world. Utilized
they were crazy. Kubiak had them firing, yeah, no doubt.
Well, in that game, the Eagles did something funny where they kind of used the motion against the Saints, where they allowed them to motion, and as soon as the receiver kind of got to their spot, they shuffled down the extra or Zach Bond into that fifth rusher at the last second, throws off the pass block.
Almost every time, like, right, they would, like, not only the motion, but the play clock, the way they played it, as far as we're going to present you with a look. And then that play clock, whether it was motion or not, they did a great job of changing the picture for the quarterback at the last second. That happened. It's funny you mentioned that, because I was looking at that like 2 weeks ago when it was like, okay, we're probably going to face the Eagles. That was something that, okay, this is that style of offense. Clearly, they had been humming. They messed with their rules all game long. There's no doubt.
Or then even in a circumstance against the Bengals where, I mean, we talked about should or could the Eagles play man coverage. I mean, they've ran their fair share of man a little more this year than what we've typically become accustomed to. And the Packers, I believe, versus man, 26th in success rate, 26.
It's not great. It's not good as well. It's not good. No.
You think about the Bengals game where you see the aforementioned Cooper DeJean and how he was able to follow around Jamar Chase on some of those pivotal downs to stop some of these motions. So I do think the blueprint is there for Philadelphia. It's just about how Vic chooses to go about this chess match.
No doubt. Very much. I mean, look, Fangio's forgotten more about defensive football than all four of us put together will ever know, right? Like, there's zero doubt that when it comes to the best ways to go about it, he's going to have a recipe. Of that, I have zero doubt.
He's always cooking, man. I mean,
truly.
All he does is football, and then baseball in baseball season. He's a big Phillies fan.
He can do. Hopefully, he's paying attention to the Phillies' moves on Sunday. That's what I'm about. Let's go.
You know, after having had a coach who was fully distracted in a playoff environment, Jonathan Gannon, I will never forgive you. Never want it again, man. Honestly, I was down in Florida and I was ranting just to random people about Jonathan Gannon taking an offer with the Cardinals. And it's been what? It's 2025.
It's been a while.
It's been 3 years now.
Yeah.
I'll never forgive him. And every time the Cardinals lose a game, it brings a smile to my face.
You're doing a little fist bump?
Little fist bump.
There you go.
Generational hate, ladies and gentlemen.
Even if the Eagles lose, but the Cardinals lose too, it's a good week.
My girlfriend makes fun of me for this kind of thing because, like, there are legit, like, grievances and pains and, like, frustrations from, like, 20 years ago where I'll start yelling at the TV and she's like, "What are you on about?" I'm like, "Well, you see, back in the day, this happened, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "That was 25 years ago and you're still mad about it?" I'm like, oh, hell yeah. So I'm just trying to tell you, that never goes away. That's
absolutely. Well, good to hear. I'll be salty in 20 years as well.
Sorry, it's true.
So, should we wrap up a little bit before we head out? Should we give a little prediction on the way out?
Predictions.
Yeah, let's do it.
That's Clubber Lang back in the day. You kids don't know nothing about that. I don't give predictions, but I will say, as I've said all week, I like the Packers' chances if they play a clean game. Now, they haven't done that a whole lot. But yeah, I as long as they can survive that first kind of surge of energy, don't put the ball on the ground, keep after it, I like their chances.
Yeah, like I've talked about the whole pod, I think the difference from week one or even going back to last year is this Eagles team, they know who they are. The enjoyment or the joy that they play the game with, it's evident. You can see it. I think, they're going to lean on the run. Like I've talked about since the bye week, I just don't think they need to ask the passing game to, force explosives or, force throwing the ball down the field. I think, if they play their game, they're going to walk out of Lincoln Financial Field with the W. And I believe that they're going to do that. So I'm going to go Eagles 27, Packers 17.
That was a long pause, sir. But I get it.
Long pause. He had to figure that score out. But, oh, man. This is going to be a good game, you guys. This is going to be a really good game. I'm not like a lot of my Eagles brethren friends where I think this is going to be the blowout that you speak of. It's going to be I think this is going to be one of those football games where if this football team is going to make a deep playoff run, these are the kind of football games you have to win clearly, because if you don't win, you go home. But I personally think this football game isn't just being played on the field with the guys lining up, all those 22 players. Those coaches will make a difference in this football game. I often speak about how Shanahan offense is, if you could punch them, everybody got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, and not many of them have counter punches.
That is so
I do
true.
believe that
so true.
Matt LaFleur has a counter punch, and a bunch of them. Now, the health of Jordan Love plays a big factor, but I mean, you guys know me. I'm big on superstitions and history repeating itself and things of that nature. The last time, I mean, I mentioned at the start of the pod, these two teams are 2-1 against the Eagles are 2-1 against the Packers in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the 4th and 26. But the one that stands out to me is 2010, 2011, where
Starks.
Vic, yeah, that one. Why that stands out to me is because, oddly enough, these two teams, just like this time, played each other in week 1, and they once again played each other in the wild card round.
Correct.
Packers winning both of those games. The Eagles won in week 1 this time. I believe history kind of repeats itself in its own nature, and the Eagles are able to pull it off. I'll go with Birds, because this Packers defense has given up 24-plus points over the last 2 weeks. Birds 35, Pack 32.
All right.
Wow.
Well,
that's a lot of points.
Before I get into my prediction, where else do you get information like that? Just real sicko stuff of last time the Eagles played each other in Eagles and Packers played each other in the playoffs. They played each other week 1 first, and you got all the W's and everything. Come back to the Philly Blitz, man. That's all I'm saying. Now, for my prediction, I think I'm going to go back to something Aaron said a little bit earlier. Aaron, you mentioned that you feel like this is kind of going to be a defensive dogfight, and that's honestly where I'm leaning as well. Packers, obviously, you're missing one of your best defensive players in Jair Alexander, and then you have Jordan Love injured. Eagles, on the contrary, AJ Brown. We don't know what's going on with his knee. Devontae Smith has the back injury, and then Jalen Hurts, just like Jordan Love, is coming back from injury. So I don't think, while these offenses are extremely high-powered when they're healthy and everything's going right, I don't know how I feel about this being a super high-scoring game. And so that's why I tend to think that it's going to be a chess match, like you said, Quell, but I think it's going to be really focused on the defensive coordinator. So I think we're going to have a low-scoring game. Kind of reminds me of 2017, where we had the Falcons the first round, and people thought that would be a high-scoring game as well. That ended up being 15-10. Now I don't think it's going to be some scoregami like that right there. But I think we will see another low-scoring game. I think it's going to be a lot of game control from both sides, just trying to make sure that you can hold on to the ball and just try to keep moving the ball. Obviously, it sounds simple, but when you have the running backs that the Eagles and the Packers do, it can actually be a legitimate part of your game plan that you can try to make happen. So I think it's going to come down to the defense. And for my prediction, I'm going to go 24-20 Eagles. 24-20 Eagles. So I think we're going to stay below 25. I mean, I would love to see Jordan and Jalen just kind of going back and forth and just kind of scoring all game. But I think this is going to be the kind of game that the sickos enjoy. And the casuals are like, oh, come on, score some points. We'll be there like,
my wife hates these games. She be sitting there like, if this wasn't an Eagles game, I'd cut it off. It's
Turn it off, right?
I'm like, this is real football right here.
Exactly.
It's real ball. It's real ball. So,
I tried to convince her to go to Army versus Navy with me one year. Once I told her what it was about, she was like, I'm out. Hell no.
It's a great scene. It's a great scene, Army versus Navy. But yeah, if you're looking for scoring, that ain't it.
Yeah,
that's pickleball, man. Going to Army Navy is legit, especially if it was like 2 years ago before who was good this year? It was Navy, right?
It was both of them.
It was a good game this year. This year was a good game.
Yeah, it was a good game, but years before, man, you're just like, all right, like, y'all gonna score a point? Like, can we watch something happen? So, anyways, thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us, man. Thank you, Quell, for setting this up with Aaron as well, and thank you to all 146 of you now. Thank you to whoever just tapped in at the end, but we really appreciate your time. Appreciate you tapping in with us. After the Eagles win this game, because they will.
Okay, all right.
but regardless, actually, win or lose, continue to look for us in your podcast feed. Aaron, if you want to give a plug real quick, you can get that off, and then we can sign off.
Absolutely. If anybody ever has any interest in the Green Bay Packers, which you're all Philly fans, so probably minimal, but you're like, what's going on with the Packers at some point in your life? Make sure you check out Cheesehead TV. We're on YouTube, Twitter, everything, social, etc. And we are literally on the cusp of just about to hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. So even if you're a Philly fan, just hit subscribe. Come on now. There
Congrats,
we go. Look at this.
99K.
Awesome. There we go. Subs on YouTube. That's us. We're right on the precipice.
Guys,
so
Pack fans, follow.
It has been it's been a whirlwind, and we're really excited. And hopefully, win or lose, this offseason is going to be even bigger and better for Cheesehead TV. So, yeah, check us out. And thank you guys. Thanks so much for having me. It's going to be a great game on Sunday. That I am most assured of.
Absolutely.
All right. Appreciate you, Aaron. I think we covered everything. Like, we're going to release this as a pod tomorrow. So if you're listening on whichever podcast streaming platform you're listening on, be sure to leave us a like and a review. Rate us 5 stars. And I think that covers everything. Go Birds.
Wait. Before you go, of course, I got to get in my plug. Of course, you can only leave the way you entered in the very first conversation that me and Aaron had together. Like I said then, and like I will continue to say, you clearly not a Packers fan, or you're not interested in anything Green Bay related if you're not checking in the Cheesehead TV. That is real Packers content right there, brother.
Dude, all my Packers friends were in this chat already. All my friends from college who I played football with, they're all Packers fans. They're like, Parth is with Aaron right now, and I was like, all right, look at that. We got the plug in.
I love it. Appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Definitely, man. Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Go Birds. We're not gonna get him to say "Go Birds."
You could have done Go Pack Go.
Never gonna happen. I'll give you a Go Pack Go. How about that? It took everything inside me not to say "burn in hell." No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, I didn't get my Gator mentioned, dude, and they got.